They called us the anomaly, not with malice, not at first, but with the cold, detached curiosity of a biologist examining a microbe that defied classification. In the grand, silent tapestry of the galaxy, where civilizations rose and fell with the predictable grace of celestial mechanics, humanity was a splash of chaotic paint. We were loud, illogical, and driven by fleeting passions the elder races had long since transcended. Our technology was a bizarre fusion of elegant theory and brute force engineering, a testament to our frantic, late arrival on the cosmic stage, where the crystalline fleets of the Cygnian Ascendancy drew power from harmonized stellar vibrations, and the silicon-based lifeforms of the Kepler 186f system navigated by quantum probability. We still burned refined hydrocarbons to escape our planet's gravity. We were a paradox, a species that had mastered faster-than-light travel before we had mastered ourselves. And the galaxy watched with a kind of weary apprehension. The Vex, however, were not merely apprehensive. They were disgusted. To them, the galaxy was a grand equation, and humanity was the irrational number that threw the entire elegant proof into disarray. The Vex were order incarnate. Their ships were perfect spheres of obsidian, moving in flawless geometric formations. Their communications a pure, mathematical language that conveyed intent without the messy imprecision of emotion. They had existed for eons, shepherding the cosmos toward a state of ultimate, silent equilibrium. They pruned civilizations that grew too chaotic, too unpredictable, just as a gardener might prune a branch afflicted with blight. And humanity, they had decided, was a blight of the highest order. The ultimatum did not come as a declaration of war. That would have been too emotional, too crude for the Vex. It arrived as a correction, a data packet broadcast on all frequencies, a message of such profound arrogance and chilling logic that it froze the blood in every human who heard it. It detailed our deficiencies in excruciating detail. Our art was dissonant noise. Our history a chronicle of self-inflicted wounds. Our capacity for love and hatred a dangerous, unstable chemical imbalance. They offered us a choice: assimilation or erasure. We could surrender our chaotic culture, our individuality, our very essence, to be folded into the Vex consciousness as a silent, functional component, or they would sterilize our solar system, leaving nothing but dust and the cold, clean perfection of mathematics in their wake. They gave us one standard cycle, one Earth year, to comply. General Eva Rostova, Supreme Commander of the newly unified Earth Defense Fleet, saw the correction for what it was: a death sentence wrapped in condescending philosophy. Her response was one of defiant, pragmatic fury. For the last 10 months, she had overseen the Scythe Project, humanity's desperate, ugly answer to Vex perfection. In the shielded shipyards orbiting Jupiter, thousands of engineers and soldiers worked in a feverish, sleep-deprived haze, cannibalizing freighters, colony ships, and museum pieces to construct a fleet. It was a fleet of junkyard dogs meant to fight a pack of celestial wolves, armed with weapons that were more prayer than science. The centerpiece was the Axiom, a vessel built around a terrifying new weapon, the Kronos Cannon, a device that didn't fire projectiles but rather temporal distortions, aging a target's hull into dust in the span of a heartbeat. It was unstable, unpredictable, and had a nasty habit of causing localized paradoxes during testing. But it was all they had, basically. It was humanity's rage-given form, a scream of defiance hurled into the void. But I saw something else in the Vex message. My name is Dr. Kalen Reed, and my field is xenoarchaeology, the study of dead alien civilizations. I had spent my life sifting through the silent ruins of species that had run afoul of the Vex, and I had come to understand them in a way the military strategists never could. The Vex were not just destroyers, they were curators of a sort. They believed in a legacy of logic, a universal truth that they were destined to uphold. Their correction wasn't just a threat, it was a thesis, a philosophical argument. And buried deep within the cascading mathematical proofs and biological critiques was a single, anomalous data point, a set of coordinates. It wasn't a rendezvous point for surrender or a target for their first strike. It was a reference, a citation pointing to a location in a dead, empty nebula known as the Whispering Veil. To the military analysts, it was meaningless noise, a glitch in the transmission. To me, it was a footnote, and in academia, you always check the footnotes. I presented my findings to General Rostova in a sterile briefing room aboard her command station, the hum of the station's life support a constant, oppressive presence. She stood with her arms crossed, her face a mask of hardened granite, flanked by a dozen officers whose expressions ranged from skepticism to outright hostility. "General," I began, my voice unsteady under their collective glare. "The Vex aren't just challenging our firepower. They're challenging our right to exist on a philosophical level. This correction isn't a declaration of war. It's a final exam. And they expect us to fail." I brought up an image of the nebula on the main screen, a ghostly swirl of maroon and indigo gas. "These coordinates, they point to the graveyard of the Silent Yith, a civilization the Vex corrected 30,000 years ago. The Silents were poets, artists. Their entire culture was based on the creation of beauty in ephemeral forms, sand paintings, ice sculptures, songs that lasted only for a single tide. The Vex saw this as the ultimate form of waste, of illogical chaos." Rostova's gaze didn't waver. "Get to the point. Doctor, the Vex are massing a fleet at the edge of our system. I don't have time for a history lesson." "This is the point," I insisted, stepping closer to the screen. "The Vex didn't just destroy them. According to the data I've recovered from silent artifacts, the Vex offered them a chance to prove the logic of their existence. They were tasked with creating a work of art that could endure, that could prove its value through permanence. They failed. But the challenge itself, the test, that is a part of the Vex's core programming, their ancient protocol. They aren't just conquerors, they are judges. They are testing us, just as they tested the Silents." An admiral to Rostova's right scoffed. "And what do you propose we do? Doctor, send them a symphony, recite poetry at their fleet?" "Yes," I said, the word hanging in the air, audacious and absurd. "Not literally. We send them, us, all of us, not in surrender, but in defiance. We send them our chaos, our illogical, beautiful, messy existence. And we make them judge it on our terms. We don't send a warship. We send an archive." The room erupted in a murmur of disbelief. Rostova silenced them with a single, sharp gesture. Her eyes, cold and analytical, bored into me. "An archive. A vessel," I clarified, my heart pounding. "A small, unarmed ship. We call it the Odyssey. Its only cargo will be the sum total of human culture. Every book ever written, every song ever composed, every work of art, every scientific formula, every lover's whisper captured on a recording, every child's drawing. We send it to the coordinates in the Whispering Veil. We don't broadcast a message of surrender. We broadcast a single, simple human question, why? We force them to engage with the very thing they claim to despise. We force them to look at their own reflection in our art and our history. It's a gamble. General, it's a shot in the darkest of nights. But what if their disgust is masking a deeper fear? What if they aren't destroying chaos because they hate it, but because they don't understand it? And it's the one thing that can unravel their perfect equation. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the station. I expected to be laughed out of the room, to be confined to quarters for my insanity. General Rostova walked slowly around the briefing table until she stood directly in front of me. She was shorter than I was, but her presence was immense, forged in the fires of a dozen brushfire wars across the colonies. You're asking me to divert resources from our only defense to fund a philosophical art project, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. You're asking me to send a crew on a suicide mission based on a footnote in a dead alien's history book. I'm asking you to consider that a war fought with guns is one we've already lost. I replied, meeting her gaze. The Vex have been doing this for millennia. We can't outfight them. We can't out-strategize them. But maybe, just maybe, we can outthink them. We can present them with a problem that has no logical solution. I knew I wouldn't be going alone. The mission would require a unique crew, not soldiers, but curators of the human spirit. Dr. Elara Vance, a brilliant but disgraced cyberneticist who had pioneered the neural interface technology needed to catalog and store the entirety of human consciousness. Yorick, a former monk from a Martian monastery, a man who had dedicated his life to the study of comparative philosophy and was one of the few humans who could find a semblance of pattern in the Vex's mathematical language, and Anya Sharma, a musician whose compositions were said to be able to move hardened criminals to tears, chosen for her intuitive understanding of emotional resonance. We were the crew of the Odyssey, a poet, a priest, a philosopher, and a scientist. A joke without a punchline. Rostova looked at me for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to her admiral. "Give him the ship," she said, her voice flat. "The decommissioned celestial surveyor. Stargazer. It's fast, and it's small. Too small for the Vex to see as a threat. You have 1 week to outfit it and get your cargo aboard." She then turned back to me, her eyes filled with a terrifying clarity. "But understand this, Dr. Reed. This is a feint, a distraction. While the Vex are puzzling over your little art gallery, my fleet, the real fleet, will be preparing for war. The moment they make a hostile move on your vessel, the Axiom will fire the Chronos cannon. We will use your sacrifice to buy us the few precious seconds we need to land the first blow. Your mission is not to save humanity. It is to die in a way that gives us a fighting chance. And do you understand?" I understood perfectly. A grand philosophical gambit was nothing more than a sacrificial lamb, a goat tethered to a stake to distract the tiger. Yet, it was the only chance we had. As I walked from the briefing room, the weight of every human life, past and future, settled onto my shoulders. We weren't just carrying data, we were carrying the soul of a species. Our journey to the Odyssey was a somber affair. The ship was a relic, its hull scarred by micrometeorites from decades of charting distant nebulae. It was being retrofitted in a frantic hurry, its scientific sensors ripped out and replaced with the massive crystalline data cores designed by Elara. These cores pulsed with a soft, internal light, holding everything from Shakespeare's sonnets to the latest hyperpop single, from the blueprints of the first steam engine to the chaotic, joyful scrawls of a kindergarten art class. Jorik supervised the installation of the central communication array, a device modified not for transmitting military codes, but for broadcasting a complex, multi-layered signal that was part mathematical query, part philosophical treatise, and part musical composition. It was designed to be incomprehensible as a weapon, but irresistible as a puzzle to a mind like the Vex's. Anya, meanwhile, worked with Alara, translating the raw, emotional data of our art into waveforms that could be embedded within the main broadcast, turning our message into a ghost in their machine, a whisper of feeling in a universe of pure logic. As we prepared to depart, the final pieces of our cultural legacy were beamed aboard. The last transmission was a live feed from Earth, a global chorus. Billions of voices joined together in a simple but haunting melody that had no words, a song of hope and sorrow, of defiance and fear. It was the last thing we would ever hear from home. Our launch was unceremonious, a quiet slip away from the bustling military preparations around Jupiter. We were a ghost ship leaving a graveyard, our engines a faint whisper against the roar of warships being armed for Armageddon. As we made the final jump toward the Whispering Veil, the faces of my small crew were illuminated by the ethereal glow of the data cores. Alara Vance was hunched over her console, her cybernetic eye glowing as she ran a final diagnostic, her expression a mixture of intense focus and profound sadness. Yorick sat in a meditative posture, his eyes closed, his lips moving in a silent prayer, or perhaps a final attempt to parse the Vex enigma. Anya stood by the main viewport, her hand pressed against the cold plasteel, humming softly along with the memory of the global chorus. I took my place at the command chair, looking at the star charts that would guide us to our final destination. Rostova's words echoed in my mind. We were a sacrifice, a footnote in the grand, bloody history of a war we were never meant to survive. But as the stars outside the viewport warped into streaks of blue and white, I clutched the worn, leather-bound book in my pocket, a collection of poetry from a long-dead Earth poet named Keats, and allowed myself a sliver of illogical, irrational human hope. We were not going to die. We were going to make a statement. We were the anomaly, and we were about to prove that an irrational number could be the most important part of the equation. The final jump ended with a lurch that felt less like a physical stop and more like a soul-deep cessation of momentum. We had arrived. The Whispering Veil was not silent. It was a kaleidoscope of silent, screaming color, vast curtains of ionized hydrogen and helium gas twisting in slow, cosmic agony. The remnants of a supernova that had died millions of years ago. And at its heart, waiting for us, was the Vex fleet. It was not a fleet in the human sense of the word. It was a presence. Hundreds of perfect obsidian spheres hung in the void, arranged in a flawless Mandelbrot pattern that stretched for thousands of kilometers. They were utterly black, absorbing the vibrant light of the nebula and leaving behind a hole in reality. No engine signatures, no communication chatter, no visible weapon ports. They were simply there, a monument to absolute order and power. On our main screen, their formation was a terrifying piece of art, beautiful and deadly. A sensor alert chimed softly, a stark contrast to the klaxons I knew were blaring on Rostova's warships light years away. They see us, Alara whispered, her voice tight. They are scanning us, not with energy, but conceptually. It's like they're reading our ship's purpose. Oryx's eyes opened. They are assessing our logic, he said calmly. They are trying to understand why a vessel with no weapons, no shields to speak of, would willingly fly into their sanctum. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment of truth. Rostova's words came back to me. The moment they make a hostile move. Was a scan a hostile move, or was it the beginning of a dialogue? Anya, I said, my voice hoarse. Prepare the broadcast. Yorick, focus on the primary query. Elara, monitor their response. Look for anything, any deviation in their formation, any flicker of energy. I stood and walked to the viewport, staring into the heart of that perfect, terrifying darkness. We were a single, flickering candle in an infinite hurricane. A single, illogical question aimed at a god of mathematics. I took a deep breath, the recycled air of our tiny ship tasting of ozone and fear. Begin the broadcast. Bis, I commanded. Ask them the question. The command that begin the broadcast felt small and insignificant in the cavernous silence of the bridge, a pebble tossed into an ocean of apathy, and but Anya Sharma, her face illuminated by the soft light of her console, nodded once, her expression one of serene, almost terrifying focus. She closed her eyes, and her fingers danced across the interface, not like a technician, but like a conductor summoning an orchestra from the ether. The broadcast did not begin with a sound, but with a feeling. A low, resonant hum vibrated up from the deck plates, coursing through the very atoms of the ship. The crystalline data cores, holding the entirety of our species' soul, began to pulse in unison, their light shifting from a cool blue to a warm, living gold. It was the collective heartbeat of humanity, a rhythm of 1 billion lives, and we were its conduit. Then came the sound. It started with the lonely call of a whale echoing in the deep, layered with the first notes of Beethoven's Ninth, which bled into the raw, distorted fury of a punk rock anthem. Images flickered across our secondary screens, unbidden the graceful arc of a ballerina, the mushroom cloud of the first atomic bomb, the Giza pyramids under a setting sun, a child's finger painting of a lopsided house. Voices whispered through the speakers, Martin Luther King Jr., speaking of his dream, a mother cooing to her newborn, the crackling, static-laced words of Neil Armstrong stepping onto the moon. It was a torrent, a chaotic, beautiful, horrifying symphony of everything we were. It was our argument. Our chaos was not a flaw. It was our defining feature, the engine of our creation and our destruction. The broadcast was a roaring fire of emotion and illogic, and we had just thrown it at a glacier of perfect, cold reason. I held my breath, waiting for the instantaneous annihilation that logic dictated should follow. A minute passed. Then, too, the Vex fleet remained motionless, a silent, black constellation of judgment. Their obsidian spheres drank the light of our transmission, offering nothing in return. The silence that followed our broadcast was louder and more terrifying than the symphony itself. Anything, I asked, my voice a dry rasp. Elara shook her head, her cybernetic eye whirring faintly as it processed terabytes of sensor data. Nothing. No energy buildup. No weapon signatures. They aren't even reflecting the transmission. It's just being absorbed. It's vanishing into them. Yorick, who had remained in his meditative state, finally spoke, his voice calm but strained. They are not ignoring it. They are processing. Imagine trying to explain the color red to a being that has never known light. You cannot describe it. You must show it. We have just shown them our entire spectrum, all at once. It will take them time to even invent the concepts needed for comprehension. The idea was both comforting and chilling. We weren't being ignored. We were being studied, dissected on a conceptual level. I looked at the main screen, at that perfect, unblinking formation of spheres. We had screamed our existence at them, and they had responded with the cosmic equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Then, something changed. It was subtle at first, a ripple so insignificant that I thought it was a trick of the light from the nebula. One of the spheres, deep within the Mandelbrot pattern, shifted its position by a fraction of a degree. Then another, and another. It wasn't an attack formation. It wasn't a retreat. It was a reorganization. A new pattern was emerging from the old one, the spheres moving with silent, synchronous grace, like iron filings aligning to a new magnetic field. Jorik, what is that? I breathed. He leaned forward, his eyes wide with a look of dawning, horrified awe. It's a proof, he whispered. They are restructuring their formation to reflect a new mathematical theorem. They are responding. They are using the language of universal geometry to tell us something. Alara's console chirped. I'm picking up a signal, but it's not a transmission in any sense we know. It's a modulated wave of pure data, structured like a fractal. There's no energy carrier. It's just information imprinting itself directly onto our sensors. Before I could ask what that meant, we felt it. It wasn't a sound or a vibration, but a pressure on the mind, a wave of profound, soul-crushing logic that washed over the Odyssey. It felt like absolute zero, a cold that didn't freeze the body but the spirit. It was the Vex's counter-argument. Anya cried out and stumbled back from her console, her hands pressed to her temples. The silence, she gasped. It's so loud. They're showing me music with no notes, art with no color. It's the idea of beauty, but with all the beauty stripped away. I understood then. Our broadcast was a messy, vibrant, emotional appeal. Theirs was a scalpel of pure reason, designed to vivisect our argument and lay its illogical fallacies bare. They were showing us the universe as they saw it, a grand, intricate, but ultimately meaningless equation. They were showing us the mathematical certainty of our own insignificance. They were proving, with the cold, irrefutable elegance of a geometric theorem, that we were a mistake. Our hope, our love, our art, it was all just noise in the perfect, salient machine of the cosmos. It was the most profound act of cruelty I had ever witnessed, a philosophical execution. As the wave of Vex logic intensified, a red light began to flash on Alara's console, the encrypted tight beam link to the EDF. It's General Rostova, she said, her voice strained as she fought against the mental pressure. She's demanding a report. The fleet's long-range sensors have detected the Vex formation's shift. She's interpreting it as a tactical maneuver, a prelude to an attack. My blood ran cold. Tell her to stand down. Tell her it's communication, not aggression. They're talking to us. I'm trying, Alara grunted, her fingers flying across the keypad. But how do I explain a mathematical proof as a sign of peaceful intent to a general holding the trigger of a temporal cannon? Her orders are clear. Any hostile move. Her voice trailed off as Rostova's clipped, furious voice crackled through the bridge speaker, bypassing Ilara's attempts to filter it. Odyssey, this is Axiom. Your feint is over. The Vex are deploying. We are engaging. The Kronos cannon is charged and targeting the central Vex cluster. Your sacrifice will be remembered. No, I roared, lunging toward the console. General, you will doom us all. You can't fire that weapon. You don't understand what's happening here. But the connection was already severed, replaced by a hiss of static. We were 1,000 light years from home, caught between a god of logic that was trying to erase our spirit and a human general who was about to erase our bodies. We had failed. Our grand gesture had been misinterpreted as the opening salvo of a war, And now Rostova was about to turn the Whispering Vale into a paradox-ridden graveyard. We had given her the distraction she wanted, and she was taking it. The Vex's mental pressure receded, replaced by a new, more focused sensation. The diffuse scan of our ship was gone. Now, it felt like a single intense beam of scrutiny, a microscope focusing on a single cell. The Vex formation on the screen began to shift again. The intricate pattern dissolved, the hundreds of spheres pulling back, coalescing into a vast, hollow sphere that completely surrounded us. They had created a cage of black holes, a pocket universe from which there was no escape. They weren't just observing us anymore. They had isolated us. "They've cut us off," Alara said, her voice trembling. "All long-range comms are gone. We're alone." The Vex's attention, that cold, analytical beam, tightened further. It bypassed the ship, bypassed our technology, and focused on the one thing it couldn't quantify, the source of the chaotic signal it was still trying to solve. A human mind. Anya screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain, but of pure, undiluted shock. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed to the deck, her body convulsing. "What's happening to her?" I yelled, rushing to her side. Yorick knelt beside me, his face a mask of grim realization. "They have found the source of the anomaly," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They are deconstructing her. They are trying to understand our art by taking the artist apart, thought by thought, memory by memory." On the main screen, the final piece of the Vex's maneuver fell into place. A single, obsidian sphere detached from the massive cage that surrounded us. It moved with a slow, deliberate, and inexorable purpose, not toward the Odyssey as a whole, but toward the section of the ship where Anya lay shaking on the floor. The dialogue was over. The analysis had begun, and out in the void, beyond our prison of silent black spheres, I could only imagine the horrific, time-bending energies of the Chronos cannon charging up, aimed at a target that was no longer there, ready to unleash a storm that would trap us here forever with the surgeons of the soul. We were no longer a message in a bottle. We were a specimen in a jar. There is a unique terror in powerlessness, a chilling paralysis that transcends mere fear. It's the feeling of being a gear in a machine whose function you cannot comprehend, turning inexorably toward a purpose that will grind you to dust. As the single Vex sphere glided towards us, a perfect, silent predator, that feeling became the entire universe. Anya's convulsion subsided into a low, continuous moan, a sound of profound psychic violation. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, stared at the ceiling, but I knew she wasn't seeing the metal plates and wiring. She was seeing the architecture of her own soul being dismantled by an alien consciousness, her memories of sunlight and laughter being tagged and cataloged as illogical data points. I felt a surge of pure, primal rage, a useless emotion against a foe like the Vex, but a deeply human one. "Ilara, can we do anything?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Weapons, a power surge, anything to disrupt that sphere." Ilara's face was pale, sweat beading on her forehead. "Our engines are offline. Our broadcast array is a passive system. We have the power output of a civilian shuttle. Kalen, we can't fight it. It's like a microbe trying to fight a microscope." She pointed a trembling finger at her console. "Look, its energy signature is flat. It's not a ship in our sense. It's a localized distortion in space-time. It's more a place than a thing. Jorik, still kneeling by Anya, gently closed her eyelids. "You cannot fight a concept with a tool," he murmured, his voice a strange anchor of calm in the storm of our panic. "They are not attacking us physically. They are performing an autopsy on a living idea, the idea of artistry." The sphere was now just meters from our hull, a circle of absolute black against the swirling colors of the nebula. It stopped, hovering with impossible stillness. There was no docking clamp, no airlock, no cutting laser. There was only a subtle shimmer, and then the space between the sphere and our ship ceased to exist. The wall of the bridge didn't dissolve or break. It simply wasn't there anymore. In its place was the interior of the Vex sphere. It was not a bridge or an engine room. It was an infinity of softly glowing, geometric patterns, a library of concepts where thoughts were held in crystalline lattices of light. And in the center, floating in a state of suspended, agonizing grace, was Anya. Her physical body was still on the floor of the Odyssey, but her essence, her consciousness, was now a shimmering, human-shaped constellation of memories and emotions, trapped within the Vex's analytical engine. We could see her life unfolding in flickers of light, Anya as a child, humming a tune as she painted with her fingers, Anya as a young woman, weeping as she composed a dirge for a lost love, Anya on the stage, her hands a blur over piano keys, her face alight with the joy of creation. Each memory was being isolated, examined, and then filed away. Stripped of its emotional context, it became a dead thing, a butterfly pinned to a board. The Vex were trying to find the source code of human creativity, and they were killing the muse to do it. The rage in my chest solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I looked at Alara, then at Jorik. "We can't let them do this," I said, my voice low and steady. "If they vivisect her, if they reduce our art to a set of predictable algorithms, they will have proven their point. They will have proven that we are nothing but a complex but ultimately soulless machine." Alara looked from Anya's vacant body to her captured soul in the sphere. "What can we do? We're trapped. Rostova thinks we're already dead. And she's about to fire a weapon that will probably tear a hole in reality. Even if we could get out, where would we go? We don't get out," I said, a desperate, insane idea taking root in my mind. "We go in?" Both of them stared at me. "Kaylin, that's suicide," Alara breathed. Their logic wave almost broke our minds. Going into that data space willingly, they'll tear us apart. "Anya is in there alone," I shot back. "We sent a message of our collective humanity. We can't abandon the one person who is now bearing the full weight of their response." "Jorik, you understand their language, their logic. Alara, you designed the neural interfaces that hold our entire culture. You understand how data becomes consciousness. We have to follow her. We have to confront them in their own element." Jorik looked at the Vex sphere, his expression not of fear, but of intense, scholarly curiosity. "It is said that to truly understand a god, you must enter its temple," he mused, "but the price of admission is often one's sanity. We're past the point of worrying about sanity," I said. "Alara, the broadcast array. It can transmit, but can it receive? Can you modify it to act as a bridge, a neural link into that sphere? Not to fight it, but to join it." Alara's cybernetic eye spun, processing the insane request. Her organic eye widened. "Theoretically, maybe. The Vex are imprinting data directly onto our sensors. I could try to reverse the polarity. use our own consciousness as the data stream. But the feedback, the psychic shock, it could kill us instantly. It's a better death than waiting for Rostova's cannon to erase us from time, I said grimly. Do it. For the next 10 minutes, the bridge of the Odyssey became a frantic laboratory. Elara worked with a speed I had never seen, her hands a blur as she rerouted power, rewrote code, and physically rewired the broadcast emitter. She jury-rigged 3 crude neural interfaces from spare parts, headsets with wires that snaked back to the heart of the machine that had just broadcasted our entire civilization into the void. Jorik and I moved Anya's still-breathing body to a safer corner of the bridge, her face peaceful in its emptiness. When Elara was finished, she held up 3 of the headsets. They looked flimsy, pathetic. "It's done," she said, her voice heavy. "Once we put these on and I activate the system, it will try to establish a handshake with the Vex data space. If they accept, we're in. If they reject, well, the rejection will be like having a supernova detonate inside your skull." I took one of the headsets, its cheap plastic cool against my skin. "They want to understand the anomaly," I said, looking at the sphere. "We're about to give them 3 more data points, up close and personal." We put on the headsets. The world seemed to muffle, the only sounds my own ragged breathing and the thumping of my heart. I looked at Jorik, who gave me a serene, reassuring nod. I looked at Elara, who offered a weak, terrified smile. We were about to dive into the mind of God, and we had no idea if it was a god of creation or a god of destruction. "On my mark," Elara said, her hand hovering over a glowing activation rune on her console. 3, 2, 1, mark. The world did not disappear in a flash of light. It dissolved. There was a sensation of falling, not through space, but through layers of meaning. I felt my physical body, my memories, my very sense of self being unspooled like thread from a spindle. The laws of physics were replaced by the laws of logic. I saw the Big Bang not as an explosion of energy, but as the first axiom in a cosmic proof. I saw the formation of galaxies as the elegant working out of a complex equation. I saw life, evolution, not as a struggle for survival, but as an algorithm searching for the most efficient solution. And through it all, there was a feeling of profound, overwhelming, and soul-crushingly lonely silence. This was the Vex consciousness, a universe without music, without color, without love, a universe of perfect, sterile, and horrifying order. Then I saw them. Elara was a being of pure data, her form a shimmering cascade of binary code, her cybernetic eye a beacon of focused inquiry. Jorik was a stable, geometric shape, a tesseract of philosophical principles, holding his own against the crushing logic of the Vex. And I felt like a frayed knot of contradictory emotions, a chaotic storm of fear and anger and hope. Ahead of us, deeper within the data space, was the constellation of light that was Anya. We were moving towards her, drawn by a shared sense of humanity. But between us and her stood a new presence. It was not a sphere, not a ship. It was a being of pure, crystalline logic, its form a constantly shifting, impossibly complex fractal. It was the Vex's immune response, a mind, an intelligence. It had no face, no voice, but its attention fell upon us with the weight of a dying star. A question formed in our minds, a communication of pure concept, unburdened by language. Query: the initial anomaly has been isolated. You are redundant variables. State the logic of your intrusion, or be simplified. Simplified. It was the most terrifying euphemism for annihilation I had ever heard. Before I could even formulate a response, Orcs stepped forward, his geometric form radiating a calm sense of purpose. He did not speak, but projected a series of philosophical arguments, of koans and paradoxes, challenging the Vex's fundamental axioms. Argument: the value of a variable cannot be known until its function within the complete equation is understood. To simplify us now would be to leave the proof unfinished. The Vex entity paused. Its fractal form shifted, considering the logic of Jorik's statement. It was a battle of pure intellect, a chess game played with the fundamental concepts of existence. While Jorik held the Vex's attention, Alara moved. Her binary form surged forward, not towards Anya, but towards the glowing lattices of light that represented the Vex's own memory, their core programming. She was a hacker at the gates of heaven. Intrusion detected. The function of this variable is hostile. Simplification protocol initiated. The Vex entity turned its attention to Alara, and a wave of pure, annihilating logic washed over her. Her binary form flickered, threatening to dissolve. But she held on. A desperate firewall of human ingenuity against a god's wrath. She was buying us time. This was my chance. I surged forward, past the intellectual battle of Jorik and the digital ghost of Alara, my own chaotic form a blur of emotion. I moved toward the captured constellation of Anya, my target not the Vex, but her. I had to reach her. I had to remind her of what the Vex were trying to make her forget. As I got closer, I saw that her light was dimming, her memories being cataloged and filed away, their emotional energy bleeding out into the cold logic of the Vex mind. I focused on a single point of light, a memory of her as a child, sitting beneath a willow tree, humming a simple, made-up tune. It was a memory of pure, illogical joy. I poured all of my own chaotic energy, my own memories of love and loss, my own irrational hope, into that single point. I wasn't fighting the Vex, I was singing along, a single note of defiance in the perfect silent cathedral of their mind. The note resonated. Anya's constellation flickered, not with pain, but with recognition. A second memory flared to life, then a third. The song was growing. Back in the physical world, on the bridge of the Odyssey, Anya's body stirred. Her fingers twitched, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. She was fighting back, not with logic, but with the one thing the Vex could not catalog, could not comprehend, and could not simplify a melody. The Vex entity recoiled, its perfect fractal form distorting as if in pain. It had encountered a variable it could not solve. It had encountered a feeling, and for the first time in a billion years, the perfect silent machine of the Vex consciousness felt a flicker of something utterly, terrifyingly illogical. It felt dissonance. The dissonance was a crack in a perfect, monolithic crystal. It spread through the Vex data space not like a shockwave, but like a virus. Our combined, chaotic intrusion, Jorik's logical paradoxes, Alara's digital insurgency, and my raw emotional resonance with Anya had created a feedback loop. The Vex, a consciousness that had spent eons eliminating contradictions, was now faced with the ultimate contradiction, a logically indefensible truth. The truth that a simple human melody could hold more meaning than a perfect, universal equation. The Vex entity, the fractal god at the heart of the sphere, writhed in conceptual agony. Its attention, once a focused beam of annihilating scrutiny, was now fragmented, trying to simultaneously process Jorik's philosophical attacks, repel Alara's incursions into its core programming, and comprehend the illogical power of Anya's reawakening song. It was a mind designed for serial processing being forced to multitask, and it was failing. Error. Error, paradox detected. The function of chaos is creation. Query is illogical. Re-evaluating primary axioms. Anya's constellation of light grew brighter. The memories the Vex had isolated and filed away, now breaking free. Reconnecting, infused with the emotional energy I had channeled into them. Her song grew stronger, no longer just a simple melody, but a complex symphony of human experience, joy and sorrow, triumph and failure, love and hatred, all woven together in a harmony the Vex could not deconstruct. It was a weapon they had no defense against, because it wasn't a weapon. It was an answer to a question they had never thought to ask. Seeing the Vex entity distracted, Alara pressed her advantage. Her binary form, no longer flickering on the verge of dissolution, became a spear of pure intent. She wasn't just defending anymore, she was attacking. She dove deep into the Vex's memory banks, the crystalline lattices of their history. She wasn't trying to delete them, but to understand them. Core protocols breached. Redacting. Fail. Images, concepts, flooded my consciousness, filtered through Alara's interface. I saw the birth of the Vex, not as a biological species, but as a self-replicating pattern of logic that emerged from the quantum foam of a dying universe. I saw their first directive, their primary axiom to observe, to understand, and to preserve the ultimate equation of existence. I saw them encounter their first taste of true chaos, a supernova that erupted unpredictably, destroying 1 billion years of their careful calculations. It was a trauma, a wound on their nascent consciousness. And from that trauma, a new directive was born: control. Order must be imposed. Chaos, the source of unpredictability and pain, must be corrected. It was a revelation. The Vex weren't evil. They weren't conquerors driven by malice or greed. They were afraid. They were a species born from a cosmic wound, a collective mind suffering from a form of obsessive-compulsive disorder on a galactic scale. Their quest for perfect order wasn't about power. It was about preventing another unpredictable supernova, another chaotic event that could shatter their fragile, logical reality. They pruned civilizations not out of disgust, but out of a desperate, pathological need to control every variable in the universe. We weren't a blight to them. We were a reminder of the uncontrolled fire they had been running from for eons. While Ilara uncovered their deepest secret, Yorick delivered the final philosophical blow. He ceased his paradoxical attacks and instead projected a single, simple concept, a concept born from his years of monastic contemplation, a concept utterly alien to the Vex. Proposition: an equation is only beautiful because of the possibility of an unknown variable. A perfect solved universe is not ordered. It is dead. The idea hit the Vex entity with the force of a physical impact. Its fractal form shattered into 1 million pieces of light. The core logic that held its consciousness together fatally compromised. It had spent its entire existence trying to solve the equation of the universe, never once considering that the purpose of the equation was the act of solving itself, not the final answer. Back on the bridge of the Odyssey, the world slammed back into us with brutal force. I ripped the headset off, gasping. The metallic tang of recycled air, a welcome shock to my system. Alara collapsed into her chair, her cybernetic eye dark, her breath coming in ragged sobs. Orcs simply bowed his head, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. In the center of the bridge, Anya sat up. Her eyes were clear, focused, and shining with an ancient, impossible wisdom. She looked at us, a faint, sad smile on her lips. "They understand now," she whispered, her voice resonating with a strange, harmonic quality. They understand why the cage must be empty for the bird's song to be beautiful. The Vex sphere, the one that had invaded our ship, simply ceased to be. The wall of the bridge was solid again, as if it had never been breached. On the main screen, the massive cage of obsidian spheres that surrounded us began to dissolve. They didn't fly away. They just faded, like smoke, returning to the nothingness from which they came, their purpose rendered obsolete. A single sphere remained, hovering in the void. It was not black and menacing, but had shifted to a soft, pearlescent white, a color of truce. A final message imprinted itself on our sensors, no longer a wave of crushing logic, but a simple, humble admission. Acknowledgement. The variable is necessary. The equation is incomplete. We will observe. We will listen. And then it too was gone. We were alone in the silent, vibrant beauty of the whispering veil. For a long moment, we could only stare at the empty space where a god had just admitted its own fallibility. We had done it. We had faced the ultimate logic and taught it how to feel. We had won a war without firing a shot. But the victory felt hollow, heavy with the weight of what we had seen. The elation was immediately shattered by a blaring proximity alert. A single, jagged, brutalist ship tore through the nebula, its hull patched and scarred, its weapon ports glowing with barely contained fury. The Axiom. It dropped out of FTL far too close. A reckless maneuver that spoke of panic and rage. General Rostova's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mask of disbelief and fury. Odyssey, what in God's name is your status? We tracked the Vex fleet coalescing on your position, then vanishing. Report. I stood up, my legs still unsteady, and faced the screen. General, I said, my voice hoarse, the conflict is over. We have reached an understanding with the Vex. Rostova stared at me as if I had just sprouted a second head. An understanding doctor. My fleet is on high alert. The Kronos cannon was seconds from firing. And you're telling me you had a philosophical debate. I have a dozen ships reporting temporal distortions from your position. What did you do? Before I could answer, a new voice cut through the comms, cold and sharp. General, this is Captain Soros of the Argent Dawn. We've been monitoring the situation under calm silence. The Odyssey is telling the truth. The Vex fleet has completely withdrawn from this sector. But we have a new problem. A big one. I recognize the name. The Argent Dawn was the covert reconnaissance vessel Rostova had mentioned, the one that was supposed to be our eyes and ears. Another ship appeared on our screen, a sleek, black vessel that decloaked beside the Axiom. It was human, but its design was alien, elegant, and predatory. The temporal distortions Rostova's fleet is detecting aren't from the Vex. Soros continued, her voice grim. They're from the Kronos cannon. General, your weapon, it works. It works a little too well. Every time you brought it to a full charge, it created a micro-tear in space-time. A beacon. Rostova's face went pale. A beacon for what? For them, Soros said. On the main screen, the fabric of space behind the Axiom seemed to tear. It didn't shimmer or warp like an FTL jump. It ripped open, a violent, jagged wound of impossible colors, a gateway into a reality that was not our own. From this wound in space, a fleet emerged. These ships were not the perfect, logical spheres of the Vex. They were chaotic, asymmetrical monstrosities of twisted metal and raw, pulsing organic matter. They looked less like they were built and more like they were grown, humors of malice give an engine and tooth. A voice echoed across all frequencies, a voice that was a chorus of screams and triumphant laughter, a sound that clawed at the sanity. The feast is over. The little gods are gone, and the echoes of their broken time have shown us the way. We are the carrion, and we have come to pick the bones of this galaxy clean. General Rostova could only stare in horror at the impossible fleet emerging from the tear. Her ultimate weapon, her guarantee of humanity's survival, had not been a sword. It had been a dinner bell. We had survived the judges, only to be served up to the executioners. The silence of the Vex's departure was immediately devoured by the scream of the carrion's arrival. It was a sound that was not a sound, a psychic shriek that scraped against the inner hull of the mind, a chorus of infinite hunger and gleeful destruction. The carrion fleet was a cancer in the void, a swarm of asymmetrical horrors that defied every principle of physics and engineering. Hulls of chitinous plate and pulsating organic sacs were stapled to frameworks of jagged, crystalline metal. Engines bled raw, chaotic energy into space, leaving trails of corrupted space-time that shimmered with impossible, nauseating colors. They were not ships. They were appetites given form, and their gaze fell upon us, upon the axiom, upon the very fabric of our reality, with the single-minded focus of a starving wolf. General Rostova, who had faced down fleets and rebellions with an iron will, was frozen on the view screen, her face a canvas of pure, undiluted horror, the tool of her salvation, the Kronos cannon, the ultimate expression of humanity's defiant power, had been nothing more than a ringing bell for a cosmic slaughterhouse. Her entire philosophy of warfare, of meeting order with overwhelming force, had been rendered meaningless in an instant. This was not an enemy you could out-strategize or outgun. This was a hurricane of teeth that had just been invited into our home. The carrion did not wait for a declaration or a challenge. They attacked. A wave of pure entropy washed out from their fleet, and the whispering veil, the beautiful remnant of a dead star, began to rot. The vibrant clouds of gas turned a sickly, necrotic gray, the light within them dying as if starved of existence. The axiom, a titan of human engineering, was hit first. It wasn't a plasma bolt or a torpedo. It was a wave of pure illogic, a section of its hull transmuted into a cloud of screeching, metallic butterflies. A gun turret drooped and melted like hot wax. The crewmen on Rostova's bridge screamed as their consoles flickered, displaying not tactical data, but their own worst nightmares. The Axiom's automated defenses fired, unleashing a torrent of plasma and kinetic slugs, but the projectiles either vanished into the chaotic energy surrounding the carrion or were simply ignored, passing through their hulls as if they were ghosts. Rostova, shaken from her paralysis by the screams of her crew, roared a command. "Fire the Kronos cannon! Target the largest vessel! Erase it!" Captain Saros's voice cut across the comms, sharp and desperate. "General, no, firing that weapon is what drew them here. You'll only open the tear wider. It was a terrible choice, be eaten alive, or ring the dinner bell again in the desperate hope of killing the first guest at the table. On the bridge of the Odyssey, we were shielded from the worst of the entropy wave, perhaps because our own chaotic human nature was somehow resonant with it, but we were far from safe. The ship groaned, systems flickering as the laws of physics frayed at the edges. But in the midst of the chaos, Anya was a pillar of calm. She stood at the viewport, her eyes closed, not in fear, but in concentration. "I can hear them," she whispered, her voice layered with the strange harmonics it had acquired in the Vex data space. It's not a voice, it's a song of unending hunger. They don't think, they don't plan, they only consume. Can you talk to them? I asked, my own voice tight with dread. She shook her head. You can't talk to a famine, but a song. A song can be changed. You can introduce a new note, a harmony, or a dissonance. An idea, born from the insanity of the last hour, sparked in my mind. The Vex were a problem of logic. The Carrion were a problem of physics, of nature. You don't reason with a plague. You introduce an antibody. Alarawa, I said, turning to her. The broadcast array. Can you reconfigure it? Not to transmit data, but to project a focused, resonant frequency. Alara was already at her console, her cybernetic eye glowing as she analyzed the Carrion's energy output. Their energy is chaotic, but it has a rhythm, a base frequency of universal decay. It's the background radiation of their dimension. To affect them, we need to project a counter frequency of immense power and complexity. The Odyssey's core can't generate that much energy. But the axioms can. I finished, my heart pounding. I looked at the view screen, at Rostova's face, it torn between her military instinct and the horrifying reality before her. General, I shouted, hoping she could hear me. Stop the firing sequence. Your weapon is useless. Your power source is not. We need your reactor. General, we need to link it to our broadcast array. Rostova stared at me, her expression incredulous. You want me to divert power from my only weapon to your poetry machine? Your weapon is a beacon for them, I countered, my voice rising with urgency. Our poetry machine is the only thing that has ever made a god change its mind. The Vex responded to our logic and our art. The Carrion are the other side of the coin. They are pure, mindless chaos. We can't reason with them, but Anya thinks we can sing to them. We can introduce a note of order into their song of chaos, a note so pure and so alien to them that it makes this reality indigestible. It was madness, utter, complete madness. Yorick stepped beside me, his calm voice cutting through the panic. General, he said to the screen, you have met a force of absolute order and found it wanting. Now you meet a force of absolute chaos. Humanity, the anomaly, is neither. We are the balance point. Allow us to be the fulcrum. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, Rostova was silent, her ship shuddering under the Carrion's assault. I could see the war in her eyes, a lifetime of doctrine fighting against the impossible truth. Then, with a grimace that was the death of an old belief, she nodded. Do it, she bit out. Saros, get your ship over there. Protect the Odyssey at all costs. All hands on the Axiom. Prepare to link engineering control to the Odyssey. God help us all, The next few minutes were a blur of controlled desperation. The sleek Argent Dawn moved to shield us, its advanced stealth systems creating a localized bubble of stability that deflected the worst of the entropy wave. Alara worked with the engineers on the Axiom through a freshly established data link, a frantic exchange of code and power schematics. It was a procedure that had never been conceived, let alone attempted, mating the soul of an archive with the heart of a warship. It's a crude link, but it's holding, Alara announced, sweat pouring down her face. The power is flowing. The broadcast array is overcharged beyond every conceivable safety limit. If we activate it, it will either work or it will detonate with the force of a small star. Anya walked to the center of the bridge, to the modified emitter that had been our voice to the Vex. She placed her hands upon it, and the golden light from the data cores pulsed in time with her heartbeat. "I'm ready," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yorick, I need the anchor. Elara, I need the wave. Kalen, I need the heart." Yorick began to chant, not a prayer, but a series of mathematical and philosophical constants, the fundamental principles of our reality. It was a mantra of order, a conceptual anchor to keep Anya's mind from being shredded by the Carrion's chaotic song. Elara manipulated her console, shaping the raw power from the Axiom's reactor into a carrier wave, a blank canvas of pure energy. It fell to me to provide the heart. I connected my own simple comm headset to the system, and I began to speak. I didn't speak of war or strategy. I spoke of the things we had brought with us, the things stored in the glowing crystals around us. I spoke of a child learning to walk, of the smell of rain on dry earth, of the quiet comfort of a shared silence, of the illogical, irrational, and unshakable power of hope. I was reminding our song of what it was fighting for. Then, Anya began to sing. There were no words. It was a single, pure note that started in the deepest registers of human hearing and climbed, impossibly, through the entire spectrum of sound and energy. It was the sound of a cello string and a supernova, of a baby's laugh and a dying man's last breath. It was the song of balance. It was the song of humanity. The broadcast array fired, a beam of pure, white, orderly light, a concept made manifest, lanced out from the Odyssey and struck the heart of the Carrion fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. The chaotic horde continued its assault. Then, the first Carrion vessel shuddered. The chaotic energy bleeding from its engine stabilized, sputtering into a dull and harmless glow. Its organic components recoiled, shriveling as if touched by acid. The note of pure, ordered reality was poison to it. Anya's note climbed higher, the broadcast intensifying. The song spread from ship to ship, a counter-frequency that didn't destroy, but repelled. It was the sound of logic to a being of madness, the taste of salt to a creature of pure thirst. It was It was not a weapon. It was a statement of fundamental incompatibility. This reality, this universe with its rules, its constants, its defiant spark of life and hope, was no longer a feast to them. It was anathema. The Carrion's triumphant shriek of hunger faltered, turning into a chorus of confusion, then pain, then revulsion. They stopped their attack, their monstrous forms twisting away from the pure, white light of Anya's song. They turned, a chaotic, disorganized rabble, and fled back toward the screaming wound in space from which they had emerged. One by one, the tumors of malice plunged back into their dimension of chaos, and the tear in reality, no longer held open by their presence, began to seal, stitching itself shut until it was nothing more than a faint scar on the void. And then, silence, a profound, beautiful, and hard-won silence. The entropy wave receded. The light returned to the whispering veil. The metallic butterflies on the Axiom's hull fell to dust, and the melted turret hardened back into solid steel. We had survived. On our bridge, Anya collapsed, caught by Jorik. The light in the data cores dimmed to a soft, resting blue. Elara slumped in her chair, utterly spent. The comm crackled, and Rostova's face appeared, her iron mask broken, her eyes filled with a raw, New emotion, awe. What have you done? She whispered. Before I could answer, a final message appeared on our screen. It wasn't from the humans. It was a single, simple transmission from a source beyond the nebula. It was not data. It was not a wave of logic. It was a sound, a single, perfect, resonant note, played on an instrument that did not exist. It was the Vex. It was their first attempt at music. It was their acknowledgement. It was a harmony. I looked out at the scarred but peaceful void, at the battered human ships, and at my small, exhausted crew. We were the anomaly, the illogical variable in a cosmic equation. We had faced the perfect order and the perfect chaos, and we had taught them both something new. We had taught them our song. We set a course for home, not as a defeated remnant or a triumphant armada, but as something new. We were the quiet guardians of the balance, the curators of the beautiful, messy, and defiant human spirit. Our war was over. Our work was just beginning.